Listen to me. Listen to me. I'm coming to Hawkins, and I'm going to defeat the Demogorgon single-handedly. Yeah!
Broadcasting live from inside the power band, this is The Blah. In this episode, everybody dies. I'm the Wolverine, along with There He Goes and our good friend Algorithm. Gentlemen, how are you?
What's going on?
Hey, people. I'm hot.
Enthusiastic.
You are
Enthusiastic intro, as always.
You are hot, Jarhigo. You are hot.
Yes.
You are hot, H-A-W-T, hot.
One of my buddies, when I was hiking, his trail name was Dudley because he was kind of like Dudley from Royal Tenenbaums, like semi ridiculous. And he's like a genius with numbers, but not the best with like, you know, his language and stuff. He had like a broken watch that was only right twice a day. Like, it was really quite funny. But he would always say W-H-A-T, hot. It's just like, yeah, buddy, it's not quite how it goes.
W-H-A-T, hot?
It just became a thing. Like, we'd be like hiking along, and all of a sudden it'd be like, yeah, W-H-A-T.
Oh, man. Wait, meaning hot?
Meaning hot,
or
yeah.
what?
Like H-A-W-T, like you just had. Like, I think the first time he attempted to say H-A-W-T, he got a little mixed up in his head, and it just turned into a classic quotable moment.
Nice.
Wow, so he got it mixed up like dyslexic moment.
Yeah,
in his
yeah.
head.
But he could do like long division in his head. But another time he was singing like Gwen Stefani's song, "This Shit Is Bananas," and he's like, "That shit is bananas, B-A-N-A-S." It's like, that's Bayonnaise, bro. And he's like, "Oh."
Bayonnaise.
He's one of my favorite
Oh
people
my
in the
God.
world. Old Dudley.
Oh, Dudley.
All right, on to the show.
Yes.
So this week, folks, we're going to be talking about the phenom that is Stranger Things. Title of this episode, Strange Days. And this week we're going to be covering
Not to be confused with the
seasons
movie
1
Strange Days.
and 2. Right, or the Doors song Strange Days. Or the film Strange Days that was referenced from the Doors song Strange Days, but the movie wasn't that great. Anyway, we're going to be talking about seasons 1 and 2. And next week, we've got a special treat. We're going to be talking about season 3, and we're going to have the entire cast of Stranger Things here in the studio with us.
Very exciting.
Chad, why don't you kick it off?
I'm looking forward to the entire like 47-person cast in the studio. That's going to be good. We'll have to get a few extra cables.
Hey, man, I don't, you tell me to book them, I book them.
Book
Okay?
'em.
I don't worry about the numbers. All right, guy?
That's up to you. Logistics are all you.
Hey.
Yeah, I think the show's really encapsulates a perfect moment in our youths, and I was the two youths, and I was curious what you two guys thought about the fact that it lined up pretty much perfectly with how old you are. Like, you basically were those kids.
Yes.
Yes, this is true.
Good talk. All right, next topic.
That is correct. Next topic.
Yes. On to the next thing. It's true. I was in the age range of 8 to 10 years old at that time.
How well did they capture it then, in terms of like your memories of kind of that era and the way it was handled?
They couldn't have done a better job. Go ahead, Ben.
Oh, no, I was going to say it's virtually autobiographical.
Yes, there you go. Good way to say it. No, it is. It's autobiographical. I mean, it's so... I don't want to get into the period piece-ness of it because we're going to talk about that, in a little bit. But it was so rich in detail. It was like you were there. I was there. The memories, man, were vast.
Did you guys grow up in the suburban environment like that? Because obviously, me growing up on Nantucket, it was a bit of a weird special case.
No, I grew up in a suburban environment exactly like that.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not exactly
kinda
like
close.
that, but close.
It was. I grew up in the sticks. Like I lived at the end of a dead end street,
Right next to the railroad tracks. That was Jahigo.
right next to the fucking railroad tracks. Yeah, and the grain plant.
And that train came by every 12 hours.
You laugh, but it's true.
Train come by once a day. Oh, my God. And there's Grandma Who's sitting on the porch.
So did you guys drive off sweet jumps all day long and have radios and code words and shit.
Let me tell you something, Chad. Sweet jumps were like part of the DNA of that time period. Wouldn't you agree, Ben?
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah. Couple cinder blocks, piece 3/4 inch plywood, your BMX, and a whole lot of stupidity. And
totally. No, Ben, classic phrase from that time period. Dude, I'll do it if you do it. I'll do it if you do it.
Yeah.
I'll freaking do it right now.
Famous last words. I don't know why, but I don't know if it's still like this at all, but when I was a kid, everybody thought they needed to be a stuntman.
Yeah, I think it was like Super Dave and all that kind of stuff.
What about Evel Knievel, bro?
Evel Knievel too, yeah, for sure.
Evel Knievel, Fall Guy, there's lots of stuff out there. But if everybody had to be a stunt, like if you're a fucking boy, you had to be a stuntman. You want to climb that tree? Yeah, all right, let's climb that tree. You can jump out of it? Sure, yeah, okay. We just did. Like, it's a wonder any of us are still alive. So
true that.
That's what it was like.
We moved on from sweet jumps, folks. Now we're on to bigger things, Stranger Things.
Oh
shit!
Did you see how I just tied that in, Chad?
See what you did there.
I like that. That was good. Very impressive.
Yeah, thank you.
I guess like one of the things, like, so you got people our age making a show that throws back to their nostalgic youths and like taking all the best bits of all their favorite movies and kind of mashing them all together. And I just thought it was interesting that it lines up perfectly with kind of more you guys in terms of your age. As I mentioned in the pregame, I was the little girl in the high chair crying while everybody argued in terms of how old I was. But I still kind of am the little girl in the high chair. But
you kind of are, dude. But I still love you, man.
Yeah. Well, sometimes you just gotta squeeze a few tears out. I just think it's interesting that, like, people like us are finally getting the budgets to create, and it seems to be so much throwback nostalgia, kind of not recreating necessarily like the favorite things from their youth, but it certainly seems to be like a thread that carries through a lot of this stuff.
Well, wait, but hold on, Chad. Before we get into this, like, do we answer your first question fully?
We're still kind of on that thread, really, right?
Are we still on it? I'm sorry, guys. Just don't pay attention to me.
Okay.
Chad, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm just curious. I guess what I'm curious about is whether, like, memory serves and whether Stranger Things is kind of, if you guys can think of any other example of recent movies or creators that have really pushed hard on the nostalgia, because it seems like it's overdone now, 3 or 4 years, 5 years later. But 4 years ago, when Stranger Things 1 came out, it was kind of quite early in the everyone our age making stuff that threw back to when we were kids kind of thing.
Well, wait, can you expound on that? Because, like, what exactly do you mean? Are you saying that there's a glut of things that have come out, like shows, films that are sort of like 80s period specific that people are doing, like it's a bandwagon people are jumping on? Is that what you're saying?
A little bit, but also like it's not a super fully formed thought, but like, yeah, some of that, and some of, like, I kind of feel like as different generations of creators stop being assistant directors and start being directors, or whatever you want to use as a, allegory or whatever, they can make whatever they want. And what they tend to want is like, or what seems to happen is like, you gravitate to your upbringing. You Tarantino, for example, gravitated to dialogue heavy B-roll movie, double feature, snagging scenes from a lot of the movies from his era, and a lot of the music in the Tarantino films were like from his youth, where he was, like 15 years older than us. And so like 15 years go by and you find a kid that's, the next generation after Tarantino, and they tend to be gravitating, like Stranger Things, to the music of their era and the feelings and movies of their era. You know what I mean? It just kind of seems like there's generations of creators and they throw back to their own, upbringings, I guess, which makes sense because it's their experiences.
Okay. Right.
Yeah, sure. I think that's right.
Right, but that's very different than what I was thinking. Like, I was thinking that you were saying that, okay, Stranger Things has come out, so now there's like a glut of people doing, 80s specific, like, nostalgia type pieces.
Well, I guess that is what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that, like, step one, a generation of creators comes, into power and they make a lot of throwbacks to their youth. Step two, too many people do it and it can become saturated. And I'm curious if you guys feel like it is being oversaturated or not, or whether, there's plenty more in there.
I think it's been going on for a while, and it depends on what type of media you're talking about. But I think especially if we're talking specifically about '80s nostalgia, musically, I noticed it first.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Like it just seemed like there were, I don't know, people around my age started having a lot of like '80s parties, and like there was always some DJ playing '80s music at the bar, or, like whatever, that kind of stuff. But then I really like, not in film, but I guess on TV, like Adult Swim, dude. '80s nostalgia all over the board, like everything from like, the Venture Brothers to like, Robot Chicken to, like all that kind of stuff.
What about C-Lab?
C-Lab, there you go, right?
Your namesake.
That's it, Captain Murphy.
So yeah, I think you saw it start to pick up momentum and snowball and those arenas and kind of then spill out into more. I mean, even movies like Donnie Darko, pretty heavy in the '80s nostalgia there.
Yeah, totally. And the fact that like Drew Barrymore kind of greenlit that one, and she's like quintessential of that period.
Sure, yeah, she was in fucking E.T., man.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, Sean Astin was in this, and Sean Astin was in Goonies, and I was the same age as the kids in Goonies. When I watched that movie, I was like blown away because I was like, these kids are my age. I was like, wait a second, what? Pirate treasure? Where? Like, I was so into that movie. It was so good. It was like the ultimate like kids adventure fantasy.
It's still one of my favorites. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And it was, exactly what you would fantasize about as a kid, of finding treasure and stuff. Yeah,
finding that secret place that no one knows, like finding those secret worlds that no one knows about. That movie did such a great job of that.
It's interesting that like I don't know enough about Spielberg, but like Spielberg really captured the blockbuster era and did it amazing. Like Goonies is like a masterpiece in youth-oriented cinema, and I'm curious where his if we're talking generationally, like his generation of creators, I wonder if that's the swashbuckler buried treasure thing was like a big thing for him, in terms of his youth.
For Spielberg, yeah, of course it was. I'm sure it was, dude, because those are the types of films they showed, in the 40s and the 50s. You'd go and you'd see those serials, man, and you'd see those like, matinee double triple features, and it would be movies like that.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
Like in like the one in the Majestic, the Sands of the Sahara, or whatever. Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Yeah, totally.
Well, and in like full circle, I feel like Stranger Things really, at least to my perspective, because I didn't grow up in a suburb, but like seems to really capture the suburban, life and the being a kid and kind of coming of age and riding around in forts in the woods and,
oh my God, forts in the woods.
The nerdy kind of kids this and the bully kids that and the, good teacher this and the asshole teacher that, like it really seemed to capture an era quite well.
Yeah, it was almost just like that, walkie-talkies, D&D, like
oh man, yeah, totally.
So on Stranger Things 1, I feel like it captured the era well, and that's great, and I don't know if it would have gone as well in a different time setting, but I feel like Stranger Things 1 like was almost like a perfect recipe, like it's a perfect bingeable show.
Yeah,
it's kind of the perfect length of time, and it has enough time to kind of weave a bunch of different stuff together. And I think the thing I liked most about the first season was how plausible it was. Like obviously Upside Down and kind of monsters and stuff is not plausible necessarily, but if it happened, the way that these people and kids deal with it, and the fact that that they can't necessarily defeat it. It's like, the government weapon is the only thing that can defeat it. It makes it much more enjoyable rather than like a lot of these movies in the 80s of that era that were like the group of misfits that end up defeating the biggest, baddest person ever at the end of it. Like these kids didn't defeat the Demogorgon at the end. Elle did, and it kind of it made it that much more real in a way because of how realistic it treated the like expectations of what these people were going to be able to accomplish.
Right. Yeah, I like how they chose like their hero to do the battling for them. You know what I mean?
And they wanted to, like they had their slingshot and they tried their best, but it's like, dude, you got a slingshot. Like you're not gonna fucking the government dudes were just shooting the thing with an AK and it was fine, you know?
That was a wrist rocket, man.
Sorry.
Right. She was exactly, Ben. But she was like their Hulk, you know what I mean? She was like their big gun, you know? So in essence, they sort of, I don't know, there's a lot of cool things going on here. Like in essence, like you could say that they sort of mirror a superhero group in their own minds. Like they each have a role, you know, there's something that they're really good at. And she's like their big gun, you know, as they try to take down this evil government cabal, you know.
But it's also kind of playtime. Like they all want to have a role in the superhero team, but they don't actually have any abilities, whereas she is the one that actually does have abilities. So it's almost like a mixture of what you said and the fact that they're like playing superhero. Even though the stakes are legit and they're all potentially going to die. Like they're just like riding around on their bikes, you know, and doing the best they can to like scoot around the place and solve fucking Scooby mysteries and stuff, but they don't actually have any superpowers.
Yeah, I mean, L is kind of like their Dr. Manhattan, and the rest of them are just like the other Watchmen. They're like,
dude,
you know,
that's true.
They sort of, you know, they can do stuff and they can plan and they can, you know, I mean, they all seem to sort of have their strong points, you know. There's like the gadget guy, and there's, you know, like they all seem to, it's not like they can't do anything, you know, like they're smart.
Wow. That's a really great thing to say, man. Totally. And I really like the comparison to the Watchmen because that's really very accurate. Like, you're right about that. It's like they don't really have any powers. And there's plenty of superheroes that don't have powers, but the way that dynamic works with Dr. Manhattan is exactly like the four boys in L, for sure.
Yeah, that's a super interesting comparison. I would never have thought of it, but it makes perfect sense. And I can't think of any other obvious story that has that kind of Dr. Manhattan perfect superpower individual. It's almost always a small handful of people that have superpowers. It's so rarely one person. I guess maybe like Superman, but it's such an interesting example.
And it's kind of neat that they seem to always be, for one reason or another, busted up into different groups. You know, like there always seems to be some extenuating circumstance that separates them, and they have to deal in like these little splinter cells.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I kind of like that about that. But I like that dynamic where, you know, like you said, 11 is like their big gun. You know, she's their Dr. Manhattan. She's the only one that actually really can do anything about this stuff. But you know, she needs their support, I think, you know.
Yeah, the kids, like you said, they've got a little bit of skill here and there, and they're smart and clever here and there. But the kids really have no ability or power to really get things done. Whereas they like, you know, it's kind of that like bit where as a kid you rely on adults to solve the problems, and in this case like Hop and Joyce get kind of involved, but like even the adults can't solve the problems. And so like this like hybrid, the kid kind of raised by wolves, the kid 11 who's never really had a childhood or whatever, stolen from her mother or whatever in season 2, and she's the one that actually makes the difference. It was an interesting approach.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, and I think so. I think it is an interesting approach. And it's, you know, I think, like you were saying earlier, like there's something realistic about it. I think that feels more realistic, you know. I think you identify less with 11 and more, although you do identify with her because, you know.
You like sympathize.
At the heart of it all, she's just a kid. Yeah. But,
yeah,
you know, I think you're sort of meant to see that world through the eyes of the other characters.
Yeah, of the trio.
Yeah.
I think, like, I liked, we don't need to get into season 2, like, now, but generally speaking at a high level, I liked season 2, maybe more on the rewatch than on the original watch. But season 2 made it really clear to me that season 1 was like a perfect little capsule of a story. And on its own was just like fantastic start to finish. Like it was really quite a simple story. It's like, you know, government lab, problem is loose, people are getting taken, kids lose a buddy and then go looking, find a girl.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah,
racing around, getting chased by the government, getting chased by the baddie, and then it kind of resolves in the school with like a single monster getting killed by a single girl, and the girl disappears. You know, like it's actually quite like you could sketch out the outline of the story on like half a sheet of paper, as opposed to so many other stories these days which seem to have so much complexity. And I think the simplicity of it made it so much stronger. Whereas season 2 kind of goes it broadens it out a bit more and kind of didn't have as much of an impact for me.
Yeah. Well, it's almost like they wrote with the intention of season one, sort of like if they didn't get picked up for a second season, it would have been wrapped up with a nice bow. It would have been all good. And then it's like when they got picked up for a second season, it's like they had to go looking for more stuff to do. You know?
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it's good stuff. Don't get me wrong. I like it.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I didn't really like it the first time I saw it, but the second time I saw it, I appreciated it a lot more. And I probably didn't like it the first time because of how much I enjoyed the like first season being its own kind of perfect on a pedestal capsule of storytelling.
Yeah, and you're not surprised anymore. You know, I think
that's true. Yeah,
the first season, I had kind of started hearing about the show through the grapevine, and finally, you know, basically got convinced to watch it, and I just sat down and binged the whole fucking thing. I think in one sitting, probably.
Yeah,
and it was just delightful. You know, it was just a smorgasbord of just. I hope I said that right.
I think you did.
Really. Is that even a real word? So
sure.
But you know what I'm saying? It was just a smattering of, so it was like a buffet of like just all this great nostalgia and just, I mean, even like the opening title, you know, like the
music and stuff.
The theme song and the music and the letters coming together and all that stuff. Like there's just something about it that just like really tickles those nerves, you know, those nostalgia nerves. And yeah, wow, the first viewing, that first season, you can't top that.
No,
you know, everything else is just like, all right, well, that was delicious. I guess I'll have another helping of that, you know?
Yeah, until you're like Thanksgiving full and unbutton your pants and have a nap on the couch.
Yeah, and that could theoretically happen. Although, I don't know. We're not going to talk about the third season at all. I don't think it's spoiling anything for me to say that I still seem to have an appetite for it.
No, yeah, for sure. I think one thing I was surprised by rewatching was how much of the development of the, you know, characters happened in season 2. Like, I guess I had kind of like blended some of the stuff together where, like, you know, Eleven's mom situation was a big part of season 2. Even like, you know, Jonathan and Joyce and Will, the kind of family dynamics were all in season 2.
Yeah.
The kind of Nancy and Jonathan fling thing was season 2. Steve developing into more than just a meathead was season. Like, there's so much of it that was in season 2 that, like, when you look back, it informs how you see the characters in season 1. But I had forgotten just how much of that stuff wasn't in season 1, just how pruned back season 1 was. You know, it was interesting to kind of see it from a rewatch perspective.
Yeah, there were a lot of really interesting development arcs there. I don't know who would you give most change in that one. I'd have to give it to Steve, I think.
Yeah, I was gonna say Steve. Like, I think like you just kind of like, oh, he's an asshat in season 1. Like, he's just like the jockey, pretty boy asshat. And then like Steve and Dustin in season 2 was just like one of my favorite bits. Like, I just love that. Like, yeah. You know, Batman and Robin kind of sidekick teaching the nerdy kid, and like the Farrah Fawcett hairspray bit. It's just really great. Like, it's just so funny.
Yeah, that is a great arc. I liked that pairing. Like, they were a great kind of odd couple. Great setup there, definitely.
Totally agree. I don't even need to think about it. That was my favorite sort of character turnaround. I liked the evolution of him, and I loved the dynamic between him and Dustin. I thought it was great. He instantly went from being like, I was like, okay, here we go. Like in season 1, I was just like, okay, this guy plays the perfect high school D-bag, like sort of jockey, you know, douche. And then like all of a sudden I was like, this is the coolest character in the show. Like, I love the way that they made him evolve, and then adding, you know, Dustin into the mix was part of that.
Yeah, it was like the heartbreak of Nancy thing really kind of opened the character up, where, you know, he became a real person instead of just a two-dimensional dick.
Yeah, like that and more. Like, he was already moving in that direction, and then that happened, and it just sort of solidified it. And I don't know. I just thought it was awesome, man. I really, really liked the character of Steve. Easily one of my favorites, if not my favorite. You know, like the arc and just the character in general. Like, that's what makes for interesting characters and interesting writing and interesting acting too, man. You know, when you have stuff like that in a show or a film.
Yeah, for sure. And even just like the very end where Dustin goes to the dance with his hair done like the Farrah Fawcett. And, it's like anytime anyone in your life, either you or a friend, like does something different, you show up at school and everyone's like, what the fuck did you do to your hair or shirt or whatever? And you're just like, whatever, man. And you're just trying to like find yourself, or the kid's trying to find themselves, and all their friends are just like, you look an idiot. It's just really perfectly captured.
That is totally how it is. And I think I actually,
and like how to be a dick to get girls, and like it was just like, and you just hear the terrible advice, and but that like a senior in high school would give that advice, and it's just it just really struck a heartstring for me.
Yeah. I mean, again, this shit could be autobiographical.
Yeah.
I think I literally had like a, Hairspray Farrah Fawcett going to school as like a, whatever tween or,
Hell yeah. I totally see you with that hair.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. I had a mullet, man. And I think there was a period in time I was trying to look like, I don't know, like Jeff Tate from Queensryche or something. And it was totally like, trying to get that haircut. But like, I remember going to school and my hair was just like solid. I think the pairing of those two characters, because we were both saying that we thought Steve probably had the largest arc, because he went from just sort of being like a meathead douchebag to sort of you realize he's got more depth to him, and that he is not just just like a Lothario jock kind of douchebag. And you sort of get that through his relationship with Dustin. You're like, all right, well, if he's talking to this, he's talking to Dustin, who is like probably the most awkward of all of them in the original friend group. And then Dustin himself sort of goes through like a pretty big arc and seems to grow up a lot in the space of season 2. That would probably put him at number 2.
Yeah, I mean, they all kind of, I mean, maybe not all, but there are a good number of people, like Nancy, I think, is quite good too, where she's like, goody two-shoes at the beginning of season 1, and then, as things develop, she's actually kind of a badass who, like, is really good at shooting guns and stuff, and, like, really kind of takes the bull by the horns. And she really pushes for the Barb thing, which was interesting. That's another thing that, like, maybe modern creators have the benefit and the curse of hearing feedback about their work. And from what I understand, like, there were a lot of people that were really pissed off with the way that Barb as a character, Nancy's friend, was disposed of, that there was like a campaign on like Twitter and Facebook called Justice for Barb, and that was a major part of the creators writing in like Barb and finding her dead, and like her parents being all fucked up and having a funeral was like a big part of the Justice for Barb kind of online campaign was the only real reason why any of that stuff was written in, and I think it added a lot to the show.
That's right. Yeah, I think that's right. And because I mean, that whole scenario was quite shitty. Like, she goes to shotgun a beer. She ends up cutting her fucking hand really badly. And then, Nance just goes off with Steve and just leaves her to herself. And like, she's just sitting up in the pool like, fuck, I mean, I've definitely been that person.
Yeah. I think we've all had those moments, We've probably had the moments, in the other person's, we've probably all had the moment where we're like, fuck off, I need to do something to like one of your friends. And then the other one when you get ditched by your friends. Like, you've been on both sides of that probably,
Yeah, absolutely. But just they didn't seem to really wrap up that part of the story very well in the first season. So I'm glad they, kind of put a bow on that one.
Yeah, and if they hadn't put a bow on it or wrapped it up, it would have on rewatch it would have been quite like you said, like empty and unfulfilled,
like a jarring loose end, that just
doesn't... But because the audience, it's from what I've read, the audience's pressure really helped inspire the creators to put a more thorough bow on it. Like, because in season 2 there is a resolution, it makes the open-endedness of season 1 like okay, and it kind of makes it a great part of the story as opposed to something that falls flat in a way. So it's kind of cool that a creator can kind of take cues from the audience to help inspire and or give ideas on where to take the show. Like, it's a cool feedback mechanism, even though half of the time it's just people screaming at you on Twitter. I'm sure that it's interesting to kind of have some of those things take shape.
Yeah, well, it kind of gives you a little bit of faith that, sometimes good ideas get out there and get into the hands of the right people through social media, because you'd often like to think it's just a screaming match and just, bots and madness and, you know,
Yeah.
so it's cool to see, it's cool to see that in action, because that wouldn't have happened, say, I don't know, even, 20 years ago, or, certainly not in the time that the show takes place in. So it's kind of neat when that stuff goes right, I think.
One of the more interesting things that I heard about Stranger Things in terms of people like talking about it after the fact was talking about how like the different Splinter Cell groups, like you were mentioning a minute ago, they split off and do their thing, and each group is gathering pieces of the puzzle in the story, and only you as the viewer know all of them because you're sitting back and watching them all, and it gives you the opportunity to have a huge cast, which normally is really difficult to manage, woven together really cleverly because you're the person who knows everything the whole time. So you're kind of weaving it together for the creators as you're seeing more and more stuff, and then the creators kind of push you along and stuff, which I thought was a really interesting observation on the way that they take such a huge group of people and bring it together. Even with season 2 with like plus 5 more people, you know what I mean? Like it's a huge cast.
Yeah. That's true.
And they even acknowledge it in season 2 where it's like they're like getting the salt for the bath in the gymnasium, and like Nancy and what's the main kid's name? Mike and Nancy, brother and sister, are like,
yeah,
we can't keep any secrets from each other anymore. Like we need to be honest. And Mike's like, do you like Jonathan? She's like, no. Do you like Elle? And he's like, ew, gross. Like even then they can't be honest with each other, which it really keeps the group separate in a way.
I think compartmentalizing like that was sort of the only way to cure what you were talking about, where you have too many things going on. It's just a giant mess. Like Seinfeld was always really good at weaving together multiple threads and making you think at the beginning that they were completely unrelated, and then all of a sudden they're totally related at the end, and you're just like, wow. Like I oftentimes when I would watch that show, I was like, wow. I couldn't believe how they just weave that all together, and it's like, it's hard to do. And I think that they do a good job of it in the show by compartmentalizing it. And it also allows for character development as well. Like, cause the core cast is the 4 boys, right? And then their core group trying to solve this mystery or battle against the research laboratory, their group grows to include Nancy and Steve and other people, and it sort of becomes like a larger core group, I guess. And like, I think compartmentalizing it like that I don't think it's the only way to do it, but it's certainly a great way to do it.
Yeah, it was an effective
and it
way.
works. Yeah. But yeah, it's very effective. Good word. Yeah, effective. Exactly. So you're able to focus on, okay, these two are working on this, and it's like, okay, we can talk about this part of the story, tell this part of the story, talk about these characters right now. Now we're going to switch over here. Da 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 da. I mean, it's sort of seems overly obvious to even say any of this, but yeah, that's what I think about that.
Yeah, and the idea that each of these little splinter cells are finding like a piece of the puzzle doesn't necessarily seem like the most realistic idea to me, but there's a delight in that kind of storytelling, where like, you're like, oh, you like, you kind of forget that it's going to happen, but like, by the middle of the season, you're starting to think like, oh, I can't wait for these guys to all come together. Because like they've all sort of got like the missing piece of the puzzle, as you said. And like, once they like all interlock like Voltron, it's like, that's when the cool shit happens.
Exactly.
So,
and it is a little unrealistic in the sense of like, why does the same random stuff or bad stuff only happen at the group of 5 or 6 people? But otherwise it would be a really unwieldy story, and so you, from a storytelling perspective, you let them get away with it. But as you say,
sure,
it's like so delightful to have the different pieces fall into place.
Sure. And it also, it's an opportunity to sort of showcase the talents of like each of those little groups, the people in them, you see like what they're good at figuring out. And, that's, what I'm saying? Like, it was like we were talking about earlier with Elle sort of being like their Dr. Manhattan or whatever. And everybody else sort of just being like a cog, but an important cog in the machine. Those little splinter cells and they're the puzzle pieces that they conjure up to put together something meaningful at the end is sort of like, it justifies their existence as characters and their participation in the story. I feel like in season 2, I found myself getting annoyed with the whole Will and the upside down thing.
What annoyed you about it?
Just the whole, like, I don't know, just for some reason I feel like that whole thing was really drawn out. I don't know if I really liked the whole, Joyce freaking out and maybe a little overacting on Winona Ryder's part.
What, the whole like, what's wrong with my boy kind of thing?
Yeah, I just felt like that trope was getting old for me in the spirit of the whole throughout that season. Like I was just found myself getting a little burnt out on that whole thing. I was like, well, just kill the kid off already. Like, I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
Like,
well, I mean, like, I feel he really was non-existent in season 1, but
yeah.
I feel similarly, like, where it was kind of more the same right up until the spy bit, which I thought was really interesting. So, like, the fact that they made it so that Will was spying on the Demogorgon or whatever the hell, the Mind Flayer. Will was spying on the Mind Flayer and able to help a little bit, and then they kind of double agent, the double agent thing where he manages to convince the government people to send soldiers down, and then he's like, "I told you shouldn't have done it. He tricked me, and he made me trick you guys or whatever." And it kind of like all turns. So I thought similarly, like it didn't go anywhere, and then all of a sudden the spy stuff was interesting.
Yeah. I mean,
they kind of redeemed it a little bit.
It makes sense in the story, but like just after the first season, and then like stuff is still going on into the second season. It's like, all right, come on, like why is this character even important? Like,
yeah,
like he doesn't seem to have much of a relationship with the other.
He just like pukes slugs into a sink and kind of like shakes in a corner.
Yeah. Just like the victim for way too long in the series or something, and then just Winona Ryder's character's reaction to it is just a little bit. I mean, I don't have kids, but I imagine I would be kind of the same way. I don't know if there's any way to really play it other than over the top, but just the whole scenario and the way it unfolds is just, I found a little like, all right already. Enough.
Get to the point.
Enough.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't really have a comment to that because that's just sort of like
your opinion, man.
Preference. Well, I mean, it is, but I mean that in the sense of like, it's like preference. You know what I mean? It's just like,
yeah,
there's nothing wrong with the writing. There's nothing wrong with the acting. And it's like, he just didn't like it. It's like, you can't fault anybody for that. You know what I mean? It's not like he's saying it's necessarily bad. You know what I mean? I mean, I think I like the way that, I'm just trying to think about season 2, what you're talking about. I mean, he's definitely like a fragile kid, and he's clearly got some connection with the upside down. And he's like a special kid, like a sensitive kid. And she treats him thusly. I mean, I guess my sort of takeaway is that she treats him that way. And she's protective of him because she gets that he's like that. And
yeah,
I don't want to say she's a little bit of a train wreck. I guess she is a little bit of a train wreck, but
she is a train wreck.
All right, she's a train wreck. Fine. She's a train wreck, but it's like,
but she's a train wreck. She's a train wreck at the beginning of the show, and then by the end of the show, she's justifiably a train wreck. So it kind of works.
Okay, fair enough. And I like that they didn't like go out of their way to like redeem her as a train wreck. You know what I mean? Like they
were able to prove that she was correct in being a train wreck. It was just like, okay, fair enough.
Right, exactly. But to finish my thought, like what I mean is that like, somebody like that's that much of a train wreck, that's had that kind of life, I really couldn't see her, like, she's trying to understand as best she can something that's totally out there in left field. Like, you know what I mean? All of a sudden the world is populated by, whatever you want to call it, parallel worlds, alternate dimensions with these like horrible creatures, demons, whatever. And it's like, she's trying to wrap her mind around that. And like her boy, which she loves. So like, I don't know. I think she played it right on. In fact, my opinion of her in this, I was so psyched to see her in this because I haven't seen her in anything in a long time. And like, I thought she did a great job, period. So that was sort of my takeaway on that. And, as far as Ben's comment on it, it's like, yeah, I totally get that it rubbed you the wrong way, and it's like, whatever, I get it.
Yeah, let me just clarify a little bit, because I'm not necessarily trying to criticize the acting or anything. What I'm saying is, like, the writers set this story up and it has to play out. But I felt like it just dragged, like I felt like I was being subjected to these, the raw emotions of everything for a little too long. It's like, okay, can we just like wrap this up now already? Like, like Chad said, like Will's not even really there for the first season, and then that's like you barely had a chance to care about him before then, and like by the end of it, I was just like, Jesus Christ, like, Anyways, I know it's part of the story, but it's just one that for some reason that arc has been a little bit of a thorn in my side. I'm like, oh Christ, more of this.
Well, I felt similarly. I think season 1 for me, I thought it made sense that he wasn't really there, but I would have liked to have seen more of him.
Me too.
And I think they were trying for that in season 2, and I agree with you, it kind of dragged on, but as I mentioned a minute ago, for me, it kind of came good with the spy thing, with the fact that, it went with, Will and his friends being able to spy on the bad guy and glean some insight as to how to defeat him, and then the bad guy was spying on them and they had to keep him drugged. Like, I thought that was an interesting kind of like culmination for him.
Yeah.
So guys, let's circle back to the nostalgia aspect for a second. I wanted to talk about that a little bit more. The nostalgia is, I don't know, plays such an interesting part and such a huge part in this series, because like you guys were talking about how, and especially you, Chad, how these, any good creator, director, whatever, they will sort of take what they're nostalgic for and they will put it into their creative project, like Tarantino did, and like these Duffer Brothers are doing, and they did. They took like, E.T. and the aliens, and not the aliens and E.T. and all these different things, Goonies, put them all together. But I gotta say, like, for all the one comment I wanted to make was that there's a lot of remakes happening lately, and we that was actually one of our first episodes that I don't even know if we aired it or not, but
no, that's a lost episode.
Yeah, that's a lost episode. But we talked about how our childhood was being stolen by all of these remakes, right?
Yeah,
and these guys did it. They did it right. They did it in a really good way. Like the nostalgia, like firstly, like, you're talking about a period piece, right? So this show is a period piece, just like Glory is during the Civil War, or, a million other films are in their various different time periods. It's a period piece. And they add so much detail to it. And that is the nostalgia as well, man. I mean, it's like, that's who the audience is. It's like, I mean, it's not just people like us, but it is people like us. And they do such a good job of recreating the period, I think is what I wanted to say. And I think they go beyond like doing a crappy remake of a movie that didn't need to be remade from the 80s. Like there's a rash of that going on right now that really just doesn't need to be happening. And a lot of these remakes are poor. We've touched on a few of them. In a few of the episodes we've done. I think we touched on the new Total Recall an episode or two ago, and it's like these guys just did it right. They did it properly, like they added the nostalgia in, but they treated it really more like a period piece, and that was the backdrop for a really great story. So it was like, yes, they wanted to add in all these elements like E.T. and Goonies and Alien and like all of that stuff. But again, they used that as the backdrop. That wasn't the story, or that wasn't, the show. And I think that's like a trap that people seem to fall into. And a lot of these remakes have fallen very flat, with a few notable exceptions. You know what I mean?
I do. Yeah. I think it's a couple things. In that last episode, we talked about the remake itis and stuff. And I think, on one hand, my understanding is a lot of the remakes and reboots they're not necessarily caused by lack of ideas. It's lack of risk taking on the studio parts, because so much of their money is made in non-English speaking, like Asian markets, where they tend to want to see more of the stuff they like. If there was like Ace Ventura 6 with Jim Carrey, they'd buy billions of dollars worth of tickets to it, versus like a new property that no one's seen before that they don't really care about. So like, it's not to say that the market over there is good or bad or anything else, other than, an article I read that was talking about how, generally speaking, the market wants to see more of what they like already. They're not interested as much in new stuff. And so there's much less risks willing to be taken.
I agree, and I think studios are looking for some kind of ultimate formula to like make a film. And it's like films are really about, I mean, I hate to sound so like artsy, lame, but like films are about art, it's about creation and creating something cool, creating cool stories visually and using other things to tell those stories. It's not just visual, there's music and sound and all of that stuff. So I get what you're saying, and I think that you're right. And it's a shame that it's like that. But I feel like these guys they just did it right. They did it differently. And the stories are well written. And this is sort of my segue into the writing. Like,
well, hang on a second, because I had a second point that I was talking about where like, it's just that like, on the other hand, like I'm with you, like on the one hand, you've got, the powers that be and the money only wanting to invest in the same old crap. And that's where the bad reboots come from. But on the other hand, what I took from what you were saying is like these guys, the Duffer Brothers and the people that created the show aren't making a show to be popular. They're making a show because they love this nostalgia. And so like they're able to accomplish a good execution of nostalgia because they're making it for themselves instead of making it for, a box office sale. And I think that that's where like the remake or reboot, it doesn't fall flat. And the fact that they, are borrowing heavily from these 80s movies, even to the point where they're like taking scenes directly from them and recreating them.
Agreed.
It doesn't seem like theft and crap.
There is a lot of that.
There is a lot of that.
Yeah, I hadn't even noticed that at first, but like on second viewing, you're like, oh wow, this is just like straight lifted from this movie, and that's straight lifted from that movie. And because they're doing it with love, I guess it kind of works for me, whereas they're not just some greedy studio. And so I that's kind of my take on what you were saying.
But if you didn't know, you wouldn't be bunged up about it. You know what I mean? And it's like Tarantino does the same thing. That's what Tarantino did. He's like, I read a book about him, and he was, like how his scripts, for the actors, it's like there's notes like that say like, oh, like such and such from this movie. You know what I mean? Like that those are like his notes to his actors, and I know that he recreates, shots and moments that are, from his favorite films. Like, but art is about taking something else and making it your own, Ben, music and
sure,
all of that, man. And it's like, that's what they're doing. I mean, they're taking all of this great stuff from the 80s and they're making it their own, as opposed to remaking something that didn't need to be remade, and like
for a paycheck.
Yeah, right. For cash.
Yeah, they're doing it with love and respect versus trying to suck money out of your wallet.
Well, yeah, but it's also an original story. It's not like this is a remake of some story from the 80s. That's the beauty of it. It's an original story, and it's a great story.
That's what I've been kind of dying to jump in and say, is that this series has been really better at tickling all those nostalgia tickly spots than any of the like reboot movies that, you've seen come along in the past 10 years, some of which are okay and some of which are really, utter tripe. But this show being an original series is really, they've done such a great job of hitting on all those, just right details.
Couldn't agree more.
And I just
couldn't agree more. I already actually, yeah, go ahead, Ben.
I think I just died. That's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay.
The main point I wanted to make was that it's not a remake. It's the nostalgia is the backdrop for a really well written story. It's a pretty unique story.
Yeah. It is interesting how they take like pieces of a million movies to make a new thing, and it is actually new. It is legit original.
Well, yeah, and there's definitely some ideas in there that I've never seen before that I'm sure there are their original ideas, meaning the Duffer Brothers, and like the that's what makes the show great, is that, the nostalgia is the backdrop. We keep saying this, but it's like that's the backdrop for a really great, well-written story.
Yeah.
What am I going to say? That's like the characters are well written. I mean, we just talked about Steve and how that arc changed and how great that was to see him sort of transform like that. And all the characters are well fleshed out, and it's like, sometimes they slow burn in developing the characters and the relationships, and sometimes they don't, and it works both ways. And to kind of segue right into the acting there, there's not a bad player in the cast.
Yeah, there's lots of really interesting characters for sure. On the writing a little bit, like one of the things that I really liked was how they were able to take the story and make it accessible to anyone. Like you could sit your mom down in front of this thing, and the like taking cues from the game and like using like, oh, the Shadow Realm this and the Demogorgon that, and like taking cues, like they were able to explain, the four kids were able to explain to each other the situation by referencing their own kind of base of knowledge, which was like Dungeons and Dragons and stuff like that. Like I thought that was really clever, and even just like the term Upside Down and how genius that is as a name for the realm and stuff like that. And it really was able to flesh it out based on using the references that people are more familiar with in a completely uncertain supernatural environment.
Right. Yeah, that's well said. There was some interesting mirroring going on. Well, I'm not 100% sure about that, but in terms of the game they were playing when the whole series opens, the D&D game that they were playing, and like what Will did and what he didn't do, and then how the events unfolded right afterward. I don't know. I thought that was kind of interesting because then they were like, oh, he didn't roll the fireball, and it's like,
yeah, he chose to put himself in danger. You know, maybe he did that now, and yeah, totally.
I mean, I hate to be like, you know, maybe it was a little bit Freddy foreshadowing, but you know, whatever. It was cool. I like.
But
that.
it worked. It kind of instead of a narrator being like, and then this is why you should think this, it kind of pushed you along and like helped you. Even a person that has no idea what the hell's going on will pick it up, and you won't have like the person sitting next to you being like, what did he say? What's happening? And it's just like, I'm watching the same show you're watching. Just keep thinking about it.
Right, exactly.
But on the cast, like you said, man, I think one of my favorites that wasn't part of the original cast is Sean Astin in season 2, dude. I absolutely loved his character, Bob the Brain.
I know, but I mean, after it's sort of like, okay, so you've got all these like, you know, all this nostalgia going on from all these references, shots even from these 80s films, and it's like then you put like one of the ultimate 80s figureheads in the film, which is Sean Astin playing, you know, he played Mikey in Goonies. It's like, come on, man. It was, I thought that was great. That was a great moment for me.
Totally. And even like
really,
Winona
really
Ryder,
and
she's quintessential to
yeah.
kind of that later in that era. This is like
yeah, no, she's late 80s, man. I mean, Heathers was I think 89 or 90.
Yeah.
Beetlejuice was straight up 80s.
Are there any other 80s heads in seasons 1 and 2 besides Winona Ryder and Sean Astin?
Matthew Modine.
Oh, Modine, yeah.
Matthew Modine.
I loved Matthew Modine, man.
Paul Reiser. Hello, Paul Reiser.
Paul Reiser. Yep. Those two were awesome too. Like I mean, Paul Reiser had more going on really than Matthew Modine. Matthew Modine was kind of the like quiet baddie, but they were great antagonists. And I like how they were like opposite sides of the coin as antagonists as well. Like, you know, Paul Reiser comes around and ends up trying to help towards the end, even though all of his like scientist buddies are like, yeah, just let them all die. Who cares?
Yeah, you're right. I love that Modine has come back. Like, I don't know where he disappeared to for a few years, but like, I was so psyched when I saw him in the first season. And, you know, Paul Reiser, it's like, of course, bring it, man. He's great.
Dude, like Matthew Modine for me in Stranger Things was very much like James Spader in Secretary. Do you guys see that one? With Maggie Gyllenhaal?
Yeah.
Like, it's just such an awesome place to plop a icon of the era. Matthew Modine's character as Papa, it just fits so well.
I'll take Spader in that role over as Ultron.
True that.
Yeah.
But I'll take Ultron over Dark World any day.
I think we'll all agree on that one.
That's it. What about the kids? The kids were awesome. I don't know, there's not a hell of a lot to say, but they were fantastic.
They've always been fantastic. And all the new additions are great. We never talked about the addition of Max in season 2.
Yeah, Max and Billy is an interesting thing.
Yeah.
First time I saw season 2, I wasn't super stoked with the introduction of Max and Billy. I didn't care, but the more I watch, the more I rewatch, the more I enjoy their addition.
I thought the brother was really interesting. He was just like such a psycho, man.
Yeah, and I like how he stole the king of the school, role from Steve, and it kind of adds a lot to Steve's kind of struggles.
Agreed.
Yeah, it gives
That was a cool bit.
definitely gives Steve a reason to sort of unite with his his group. Yeah.
Oh, he's been cast out of the castle.
Yeah, it gives Steve the like fallen hero kind of moment where he loses everything kind of thing.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, this is true.
It is true what you have heard. Machines.
Yeah, so I hear.
The one thing about the kids, though, like, the only other thing really that I've got to add on the cast is, like, I really, really, really like season 1. And if there was only a season 1 and never anything else, it would have been fantastic. I'm not saying they shouldn't make anything else, but, like, on its own, the fact that there's, like, 10-year-old kids and it's just, like, the perfect encapsulation of a story, I really love it. And I don't dislike the kids in season 2 by any means, but the fact that they're a little bit older, it kind of works on one way because they're developing as people and as kids, and on the other hand, it kind of takes away from the magic that was them as like really little kids in the first season, if that makes sense.
Well, I mean, yeah, that sort of the evolution of characters in general. It's like you're never gonna have the magic that you had in the beginning. You know what I mean? Like that's the thing that sort of blows about stories. Like it's like Avengers. Like when I first saw the first Avengers, I was in LA at the time, and like I remember going to the theater, and it was just like full of geeks, and like people were dressed up, people weren't dressed up, people were cheering, yelling. It was like the best. It was the best experience in a theater I've ever had for a movie. And it's like you'll never get that feeling again. And we talked about it when we ranked the MCU films at like Age of Ultron was like whatever, and like this and that. The first Avengers movie was awesome because it was like the first team up movie.
Yeah.
And you're never going to get that feeling again, I guess is what I'm saying. So it's like you're never going to feel that way about those kids again, as they're riding their bikes all over the place in the fall in Indiana, like I don't know.
Yeah. I can't remember if the van flip was season 1 or season 2, but like you just like the holy shit, that's fantastic kind of unfolding of the story for the first time. Yeah, I'm totally with you.
Yeah. They didn't worry about planning for the future. They just made something that wrapped itself up really nicely in one season. And then it seemed like maybe like after that they've sort of been like, okay, how do we move the story forward? They've been like, not that I think it's a struggle, but it's like, okay, now we're moving into things that are,
well, they're different and people are going to like it or they're not. It's the same conversation as like the Matrix and its sequels, really.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure. And I'm not criticizing the second or third season here. I'm just saying that you're not going to catch the magic of the first season because I feel like they wrote the first season a certain way that was really satisfying, The other thing I was going to say is how long do you think the show can go on? Because it seems like the kids are growing up,
Yeah, they're going to be like in college. It's going to be like Saved by the Bell, the college years pretty soon.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I don't think you can go there with this one. You know what I mean? Like they gotta wrap it up pretty soon, I think.
Well, they are, because I did some reading about it, and before I get into that, I just want to say, because it's relevant to a thing we were talking about a little while ago, is that these guys shopped this script around to like 15 different production houses, and nobody wanted it because they were like, it's about kids, it's never going to work, and like they stuck to their guns, man, and they were right by a large margin, as we can see now, But they said that it was originally intended to be 4 or 5 seasons, and that's it.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And so
I would have I haven't read anything about it, but I would have kind of, if you were to ask me, I would have guessed like a trilogy of seasons would have made sense. It kind of like surprised me to hear that there's like, potentially 5.
Yeah, potentially 5. And you're right. The kids are getting older. I mean, look, the first season takes place November 83. Season 2 takes place October 84. And season 5 takes place July 85. So, and then there's a year, it looked to me like in the production schedule, there was a year and a half between seasons.
Something
not
like
a
that,
year,
yeah.
like in House of Cards and Ozark and some of these other shows. They come out like, every March, like on the nose every March each year. But it's like this one, it's like a year and a half. It's not a 12-month cycle. It's like an 18-month cycle. So, that's the problem with, using young actors. It's like they're growing, man, and in the second season, they still pretty much retained a lot of that youthfulness, but it's like they're going to outgrow soon. You know what I mean? Like they're going to have to wrap it up. But it sounds like they are either in 4 or 5. So you're going to get your wish.
I hope they wrap it up in 4. I don't really see any value in going to 5 personally.
I hope they do too. People try to drag stories out way too far, and it's like, just don't drag it out. Just end it, and then just be joyful that it's like what it is, you know,
and move on, and don't like not to go too far off, but like don't end up in the Game of Thrones space where like the creators seem to be getting bored of their own creation by the end of it, and just so like, all right, let's get this done.
Yeah. Just have joy feelings about it.
Yeah, the joy feelings, man.
In the joy way you pause to make a glib witticism.
Right, citizen?
John Spartan, you are fined 1 credit for violation.
Right? Did I just do that? I sure did.
That was so good. I love it. The only other thing I think would be worth touching on, because we're going to get into season 3 and kind of the high level stuff next week, is the conclusion of season 2 with the snowball and finally getting some actual like childhood moments instead of it just being like suspense filled horror movie.
Yeah. So go ahead. What about that?
I think,
or is that it?
No, I think that, on one hand, you've got Max and Lucas kind of budding romance in season 2, and you've got Mike and Eleven finally getting some time together, even though she doesn't come into the dance until a little bit later, and that whole thing. But I think for me in particular, the Dustin with the hairspray and the like light blue suit coming in confident, and his friends being like, "What's up with the hair, dickhead?" and then him trying to get girls to dance with him, and all of the girls saying no, was a really powerful and poignant kind of thing, with him like kind of crying, and then Nancy goes over and dances with him and stuff. Like, it was a really interesting and great conclusion.
Yeah, right. No, what I meant by my comment, or is that it? I meant like you kind of summed it up in that short sentence, like saying, it was good to see them end it, just them doing normal things, and it was cool to end it like that, and to end it on something as awkward and awful as like a prom / homecoming dance. Like, I mean, it's perfect, man. Like everybody's been there. Everybody's been to homecoming. Everybody's been to prom. Everybody knows what that's like. It's weird, and it's like you're trying to like dress it up and be cool, and nobody's really pulling it off. You know what I mean? Because you're teenagers. So yeah, I thought it was a nice way to end the second season, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's nice I like that they seem to wrap it up. I think even season 1, for the most part, was wrapped up in a way where after all the shit these kids have been through, they don't seem any worse for the wearer, like they seem to like be able to get on with their lives. And it's one of the interesting things about it. And it's one of the things about the characters that's, I think, kind of interesting is, I mean, these are just kids, and they're going through some crazy stuff.
Good point.
But none of it seems to really affect them in a way that's traumatic, like they're able to get on with their lives, and
you get the life goes on thing.
Yeah, and that's an interesting way to frame it. That says something about their character. It says something about them, like that they're, I don't know, maybe it's a weird fantasy detached thing because they play D&D or whatever, and they're just thinking of these adventures and
campaigns done.
Yeah, they're thinking of things in those terms. It's like, oh sweet, this is like stuff come like real life. It's like coming true. I don't know, but it may not be realistic, but I like that about it. I like the way they handle it that way, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to move the story forward if they were just traumatized and going to therapy and freaking out and
curled up in a corner afterward. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, super screwed up.
Yeah, it's like, these are like, courageous, adventurous kids that, that care about each other, and that's how they get through it.
And that they're always right, and they're always trying to go back to normality, right? They're always trying to restore normality and like move on and keep, going with the normal things in life, right?
Yeah, and they seem to be able to embrace that, like when things go back to baseline, they seem to be okay, like they're able to get on with their lives in a way that's normal, that and it goes right back to like, okay, these really are just kids. There's nothing unusual about them.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mention it, because season 1 does wrap up in a similar way to season 2, where they're sitting around the Christmas table, Jonathan and Joyce and Will are sitting around like eating soupy mashed potatoes, and Jonathan, the older brother's kind of taking pictures with his new camera that Nancy and Steve gave him and stuff, and like it does kind of go back to normal in a way.
Yeah.
And then the entire season 1 is like a huge explosion of craziness, and then it goes back to normal, and then season 2 is like a further explosion of craziness, and then they'll have their first kiss at a dance. It's an interesting way to tie it up, but it does, like life goes on. Like it's not like the 80s where everyone like jumps up in the air and it's freeze frame. Like life does go on.
Yeah, no, it's not that kind of 80s. it's not like the end of Chips, in the coffee break room with Grossman. Oh my God, that should be the outro music for this episode, dude.
I saw an interview with the kids maybe a year ago or something about season 2 and how there's like an extra show. There's like a weird behind the scenes show on Netflix you can watch from around the time season 2 came out. And in one of those episodes they were talking about how those kisses were actually their first kisses, which was an interesting kind of fact, like the first time any of those 4 actors had ever kissed anyone was on camera, like doing takes with people they probably didn't want to kiss. And I thought that was like,
wow,
it was kind of a wild, window into the fact that these kids are actually really kids and it's not just playing kids on TV.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it's very cool. I didn't know that. That's really cool stuff.
I mean, it's kind of unfortunate that their first kiss was like, on a set as opposed to in real life and whatever. But it's like between Harry Potter and Stranger Things, like it's interesting to see casts grow up in the stuff you're watching, like they go from 10-year-olds to 20-year-olds and it's really wild. But I think like Harry Potter was probably the first time ever that you get to see kids grow up on screen and it like fits with their characters. And I'm not massive into Harry Potter, but like Stranger Things, same, like these kids are growing up and it's wild to be able to have the same kids instead of casting new people to play the teenage versions. I've always found that a little annoying when, a story ends up like you're like, oh, that's a really interesting young actor, and then like act 2 they have a completely different person play the character and you're just kind of like, oh, I want to know what that kid's up to now.
Mm-hmm.
I think I died.
You did.
See, I was gonna say I died by a failed attempt to shotgun a beer and I bled everywhere and the Demogorgon got me, but I think I just died a second ago. So how did you guys die?
I like that.
Maybe you died from a Farrah Fawcett hairspray incident.
Oh my God. All right, Ben, go ahead and say how you died and I'll come up with something.
Oh Christ. There were so many of them tonight that they're just like, little deaths here, there, and everywhere. Where just whatever, whether it be my ability to convey an idea falling short, or just the attention span of you,
or your ability to remember how you died.
This is the moment that I definitely died. Yeah,
there you go.
Let's start calling you Zombie Boy.
No, I'm with you, man. It was definitely a night of deaths. Like there was a lot of death going on. I died many times. You died many times. Here's how I died. I in the midst of all of this, had robbed a bank. This is in true 80s fashion. Robbed a bank. I was being chased by the cops down an alleyway. I was driving a car, and then my car hit a bunch of boxes.
Yes.
And when my car hit the boxes, it went up on 2 wheels. And when it went up on 2 wheels, and then basically flipped over, and I got out and I started running, and then the cops were on foot chasing me, and they grabbed me and slammed me up against a chain link fence, and that's what killed me.
That's it. This is death by chain link fence.
Kev, when you hit the boxes and you went up on 2 wheels and the car flipped over, did it explode immediately after you got out of it?
Oh, totally. Yeah, absolutely.
Of course, Ben. Of course.
No, what actually happened was a bunch of foam popped out and you were in a cannoli.
Oh man, I like that.
What does he say, Kev?
Hey, I don't know. I don't know what happened. I got out of the car. All of a sudden, the car turns into a cannoli.
I love it.
Insert clip here.
This car turned into a cannoli.
I didn't get to say. I really didn't get to say Hawkins enough, like Schwarzenegger. Either.
That's all right.
Hawkins.
Well, you'll have more opportunity next week. We're talking season 3, so we could do some more Schwarzenegger.
Listen to me. I'm coming to Hawkins, and I'm going to defeat the Demogorgon single-handedly. Yeah!
I'm going to come to Hawkins, and you better save enough room because I'm going to ram my fist into your stomach.
I'm going to need a Uzi 9mm.
Oh, this is Arnold's Pizza Shop.
I'm out killing pepperoni.
That's it. And then he says something like, if you like pepperoni or 9mm bullets, call us for a pizza. It's something like,
if you want something crazy like a pineapple or broccoli, I'll come to your house and kill you.
I fucking love Arnold's Pizza Shop.
I'm coming to Hawkins. I need the plasma rifle with the 40-watt range.
I don't know what's funnier in that pepperoni thing, Ben, is like the whole thing about Arnold's Pizza or the buddy in the background laughing
Cracking up,
the entire time.
He's losing it.
So funny.
All of it comes together in a wonderful cocktail of silliness. But yeah,
it's like Kev said, it's a paella of silliness.
It's a paella of silliness.
I like the way Ben just said it. It was very eloquent.
Well, fuck you.
Okay.
I gotta say, we gotta use paella more often. I think we need the paella.
We need the paella.
Okay. On that note, we'll see y'all next week.
On that note, yeah.
I will see you at another time.
All right, later, Jobin. And that's going to wrap up this week's episode. If you want to find links to the stuff we spoke about today, you can find them in the show notes in your podcast app of choice or at the website ebd.fm/16. If you have any thoughts on the show, comments, or complaints, or an idea for a topic, hit us up on Twitter at EBD Podcast. You can find me at Moverine on Twitter. That's MOHLVERINE. Chad is at Chad Normal on Twitter. Ben is at Jarhigo on Twitter. That's JARHEEGO. And if you like the show, please recommend us to a friend.
Subscribe, follow, rate, and review.
Word of mouth is powerful. Please recommend this to your friends.
Yeah, I'm down with that. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time, folks.